I've always been a huge fan of speedrunning, a subcommunity within gaming that is dedicated to breaking games, disregarding the wishes of the developers, and rolling credits as fast as humanly possible. But it's always something that I have respected as a fan, but have never felt capable of jumping into as an actual participant. This is because speedrunning is a ridiculously hard thing to do that requires an acute understanding of all aspects of the game, not to mention a near-flawless execution of every single mechanic and skip within the run. It's a logistical nightmare, which is why I truly appreciate games like JETRUNNER. This game immediately reminded me of top-tier indie darling Neon White, with its ability to allow players to speedrun speedrunning and give them that feeling of movement mastery right from the outset. But it's more than just a Neon White clone, as this game has a unique story to tell, interesting mechanics of its own, and takes inspiration from other avenues of the FPS genre. But enough dawdling, it's time to move, so pick up the pace and keep up as we race through this JETRUNNER review.
An underdog story.
Contrary to the approach the game takes, I think I'll start slow with some of the more middling aspects of this speedrunner as a warm-up. Then, when we are feeling all limber, we will kick into overdrive. As much as it serves its purpose, I don't have a lot of glowing things to say about the story of JETRUNNER. But equally, to have a story at all in such a precision platforming-focused game such as this is a welcome bonus more than anything. You play as Nina, a plucky upstart from the mean streets of NYC who aspires to be a globally recognized JETRUNNER. To achieve this, you aim to run makeshift courses in the Big Apple's sewers, of all places. However, before long, you'll be competing on the grandest stages of them all, with your runs being called sardonically by the world-famous Mick Acaster. Not to strip away all the pomp and ceremony of the game's story, but it is effectively a running commentary that progresses with each new level, with a still-frame ending movie to cap each major chapter. It gives some color to the action, but it never really resonates with the player all that much. A statement that might seem a little harsh, as the story in a game like this is always going to play second fiddle to the gameplay. But as I have seen from games like Rollerdrome that follow this same underdog competitor narrative approach, a little can go a long way. But as I often say, when playing a platformer, all you need is enough narrative and world building to give you a simple motivation to get from A to B, and JETRUNNER does that and then some. So while it isn't Neon White's levels of character development and whimsy, we can't complain too much.
A cel-shaded haze.
After that warm-up, we are stepping up the pace as we make reference to this game's eye-catching art style that feels like a perfect blend of cel-shaded pop art and comic book-style action shots. One thing a game that moves at such a frantic pace has to do is ensure that all the key assets to help you navigate the stage are easily spotted, which is perhaps why Neon White, by contrast, went with such bright, heavenly level designs. The gameplay is where JETRUNNER really shines, allowing you to feel like a godlike parkour prodigy from the moment you start your first level, which makes it all the more impressive that JETRUNNER manages to offer this vibrant, diverse set of locales to run while also providing enough clear, telegraphed assets to make reactionary, fast-paced gameplay feel natural and satisfying. Playing as a badass jet-running chic combined with this popping art style made me feel as if I had stepped into some sort of late 2000s Disney Channel animation, like Kim Possible, as I zipped around the map, making athletic and acrobatic feats look easy. I will say that the soundtrack is rather forgettable, which is a shame in a game where you'll be playing the same tracks over and over to try and get the best time you can. But all in all, it's a beautifully presented game, and the visuals marry well with the high-octane gameplay.
Wall running and gunning.
Okay, we are breaking out into an all-out sprint now, as the gameplay is where JETRUNNER really shines, allowing you to feel like a godlike parkour prodigy from the moment you start your first level. It's clear that the game borrows many aspects from Neon White, as the level design, mandatory targets to hit, and FPS meets platforming setup all feel very much in line with Ben Esposito's magnum opus. However, JETRUNNER also draws inspiration from the cult classic FPS Titanfall, allowing players to wall run on almost any surface to change direction, maintain momentum, and chain actions seamlessly, shaving vital seconds off their final time. Running at speed, boosting, sliding, and wall running are the core principles of the gameplay that need to be mastered in the early levels. But before long, the game will give you a whole wealth of new toys to play with, like grapple hooks, freeze rays, explosives, and much more. I have to commend how well paced the action is, because even though the game only lasts for 6 short-lived chapters, every single one of them packs a couple of game-changing gimmicks in there that elevate the gameplay, keep things fresh, and add complexity to your run. This means that by the end, the game will be asking the world of you, but because you'll have grown in aptitude with each new level, you never feel overwhelmed or out of your depth, instead getting progressively better and enjoying the deep satisfaction that comes with perfecting each new course. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, as there were times when some mechanics didn't behave consistently, and moments where my character would collide with set dressing on the course path to grind my run to a halt. But because each run is so bite-sized and you can restart in seconds, there's never enough time to feel frustrated. In short, it has some minor kinks to iron out, but overall, JETRUNNER is a game that allows the player to enter a complete flow state and is just as satisfying, rewarding, and fluid as any other parkour-based game on the market.
Going a little too fast. I found it hard to be critical of this game, as it succeeds in offering the high-octane, fluid, and action-packed experience it promises. However, my issue is that it perhaps does this a little too well, rarely pushing the player to the limits of their ability. The joy of games like Neon White, from one level to the next, was feeling out the course, finding the subtle nuances of each level, and then finding the optimal way to execute for the best possible time. Something that I simply didn't feel the need to do in JETRUNNER. I don't consider myself to be a world beater at these types of games in any shape or form, but aside from a handful of courses, I was getting gold medals on the first run without so much as eyeballing the track before setting off. This is ideal for casual players, as it caters to those who simply want to complete the game and aren't overly concerned about ranking on the global leaderboard. But I found these wins to be a little hollow, as I felt like I didn't work for them. Some of the platinum medals were harder to come by and required the player to carve out some shortcuts and use newly introduced mechanics in novel ways. But even these shortcuts and tricks seem to be too obvious and telegraphed. The one caveat I will add is that it does take a really high level of skill and perception to find the hidden coins throughout each level, and the bonus tracks are a blast. However, I just wish they would have upped the difficulty level just a touch to get the most out of every level present, especially when there are so few. The verdict. JETRUNNER is a game that proudly sets out to be a worthwhile blend of Neon White, Ghost Runner, and Titanfall's FPS parkour action, and against all odds, this plucky indie pulls it off with aplomb. While the story is a little lukewarm and forgettable, the stunning cel-shaded visuals and smooth, fluid gameplay more than make up for this, allowing players to enter a state of flow and achieve feats of acrobatic skill that are beyond comprehension. The main shortcomings of the game are that some mechanics could use tiny tweaks to avoid players adding fractions of a second to their time through no fault of their own, and the game isn't difficult or deep enough to get the most out of the limited number of courses. But all in all, if you're looking for a new FPS-focused parkour game, you'd be hard-pressed to find one better than JETRUNNER.